Well, it takes a certain mentality to go through a game after having missed a penalty, and it was a pretty bad penalty. You're 1-0 down away at a team in the bottom three who have just gotten the best out of the new manager bounce, or so it seemed, for about 85 minutes. Then come up with 5 minutes to go to get an assist for the equaliser, then come up in the 95th minute or so to come up with the winning goal and make it 2-1. But in Jude Bellingham, mentality, there's nothing like it. Like, you are dealing with a special player in terms of the self-confidence, self-belief to think he can go and win a game on his own, the arrogance of it almost. But it's something that top players possess, and he does. Is he having his greatest season so far? No, which feels mental to say because it feels like he's still about 20, 21. But even still, with these poorer performances, he's taken the club on his back, the club of Real Madrid, and just going and winning games from even still. Like, he's taken that responsibility, he's shouldering the burden. He looks ready to as well. He looks ready to accept whatever the responsibility is of playing for the club, where maybe others are shying away from it. And you've got to give full credit to that. And it masked a seriously, I'm going to say average display. And to be honest with you, I think average is being generous. I don't know why I'm giving him that type of gratitude, because it was very poor, especially in the first half. In the second half, Valencia sat back, and if anything, I think they allowed too much respect towards Real Madrid. I think they allowed themselves to sustain too much pressure. And in the end, with the quality that Real Madrid have off the bench, they were always going to find it hard to maintain the position they got themselves in the first place. But full credit to them for their first half display. They were unlucky not to come away with anything, especially when Real Madrid went down to 10 men. Vinicius Jr. getting himself sent off in the silliest way possible. So unlucky, but you're dealing with certain types of players that can change games, even when it doesn't seem like it's deserved to happen. But Jude Bellingham, he is him. We'll go over the Valencia attacking phase first when discussing this game. Also, I just realised I wrote down Militao for Rudiger's name. Just ignore that. And I've not done Vasquez's number well enough. This has gone well so far. What a start to the video. So Valencia lined up in a sort of 2-3-2-3, slightly isometric, as it would be the holding midfielder Barrenechea in between Folkier and that guy at left back. I don't know the Valencia team well at all. I'm sorry, I don't know the pronunciations that well. And if you've heard me speak about players that I do know fairly well, you'll understand why I'm not going to risk the whatever could come from getting a player that's got that much of a complex name wrong. Almeida and Guerra high up in the 8 positions, Duro as the striker, Rioja as the left winger, and Lopez as the right winger, but he'd slowly start coming in almost as like a right-sided striker in the central areas, dragging Mendy in with him. And Real Madrid's off-the-ball shape was... It's not so much the shape, but it was more the application of the players within that shape. And it was absolutely dreadful, especially that front four. Vinicius Jr., Mbappe, Bellingham. Rodrigo's the one I'm going to give a slight little bit of... I'm going to say credit. I'm not going to give credit, but I'm not going to be as critical of him as I am the other three. But he still wasn't great. It's just he wasn't as bad as the other three. The press with these front four, non-existent. Don't do enough at all in these shapes from a pressing point of view, from a maintaining energy, from a shadowing and blocking a passing lane while going to press. Every little fundamental basics of pressing, these four just do not have in them. And it's hard to have a successful team when you have such passengers. And I know Real Madrid have always had passengers. They had, Bellingham, Vinicius Jr. In last season with Rodrigo. You bring Mbappe in, it makes it worse. But I feel like even Madrid have their limits. And then when you add Mbappe onto that, it's tough. That's a lot of tough work that you're leaving the rest of the team to cover. And Valencia would pop it around in these deeper areas with the holding midfielder getting on the ball, Barrenechea in between the centre-backs and the full-backs. So let's just say if Barrenechea had the ball here, you'd get him playing it back to Mosquera. Bellingham would jump up from him to try and press Mosquera. The problem is he wouldn't shadow the run into Barrenechea well at all, so the pass could simply be played back to Barrenechea, and he had the time and space to turn and play forward for Valencia, and that front four for Real Madrid were completely taken out of the game. And it was even exploited, even if Bellingham did shadow that run in, because he could play it around the outside to the full-back, where Rodrigo wouldn't really get close to him. Bellingham wouldn't recover in well enough at all, so the pass could simply go in sideways, and he'd still have that same amount of space to run into. He'd still have those 4 players up the pitch, beaten. Again, even if it wasn't Bellingham and it was Mbappe, on the left-sided centre-back for Valencia. Vinicius Junior came in to mark the player on the ball. Similar issues. Wooden Shadow was running well enough. The ball could go to the full-back or still high up into the holding midfielder, and the front four were taken out. And Vinicius Junior getting caught up so high was such an issue for Real Madrid because with Lopez's narrow positioning, it would drag Mendy in a lot narrower, and Folkier would make the movement high up, and he would provide the width on the right hand side. So if Berenacchia, if Guttigara, if Almeida could find that ball over to him, he had a lot of space that he could attack down that right hand side, and it would cause one of the Real Madrid players to have to make a decision about whether to come over. Does Ferland Mendy come over, risk leaving his man free? Rudiger would then have to react, and then Tchouameni come across as well. So it leaves you that little split second moment where Valencia have a free man in that attacking stage. Does maybe Ceballos come over into this side, causing Valverde to come over? Occasionally, and this is where I'll give the slight little bit of a blight to Rodrigo, he could get into cover and make it a bit more of a midfield three. On occasion, it wasn't consistent, but it was a lot more than the other three were doing. And you could sometimes stop it that way, but again, it's not aggressive, it's not intense the way they jump into the challenges in transition. Real Madrid, so Folkier got time and space a lot of the time on the right hand side to put crosses in, to find passes, to provide cutbacks, and Valencia ended up taking the lead through that action. And as I say, it was a dangerous game. And there were points where Valencia even had the attack going for, you're looking at like 15 to 20 seconds, and you'd still just see Real Madrid ending up with a back four and a midfield two. Poor recovery runs from Bellingham, poor recovery runs from Vinicius Junior, Mbappe, and Rodrigo to offer support, to offer that level of defensive solidity to stop the flow of the Valencia attack. Again, easily outnumbering that back line with the fullbacks coming forward and in the 2-8s offering support. Individual quality is great, but individual quality can't always bail you out. It isn't always the fail-safe that people seem to think it is. And sometimes when you're not doing your defensive work well enough, you're giving the opposition chances to get in front and to hurt you and to sting you. And then it becomes desperate. And then you're lucky when you have those players that rise to the occasion to win your games. And I know that's been Real Madrid's thing for the last few years under Ancelotti, but it doesn't feel as sustainable because it doesn't feel like they have the individual quality to win in games consistently. You had Benzema that could score you a hat-trick out of nowhere. You don't have that same reliability out of Mbappe. Combine that with the injuries that Real Madrid have had. Bellingham's dropped off a lot this season, as I was speaking about before. Vinicius Junior is playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder with the whole Ballon d'Or thing, but he's also had his petulant moments like he did in this game where he got sent off. Rodrigo's been injured a lot, so when you don't have the individual quality to rely on because it's A, not been as consistent, and B, not been as available, this defensive issue will cause you all sorts of problem. And fair play to Valencia, they had a game plan to exploit it brilliantly. Had enough chances in the first half where maybe they could have done better with and potentially put the game out of sight. But by not doing that, you give Real Madrid time to get back into the game. And how did they attack? So Real Madrid would initially build up in a sort of 2-4-1-3 with Valverde and Ceballos in between the fullbacks who would look to try and maintain width. Vinicius Junior up high, coming in narrow and staying out wide, interchange depending on the situation with Mbappe. Rodrigo out wide on the right. Bellingham trying to provide the link between the two, Valencia in their 4-4-2 shape. Very compact, very narrow, and with marks only, wouldn't necessarily go and press man for man. Just try and wait for Real Madrid to play it around the outside. Then you get maybe Lopez coming up to press Mendy if it came into this area, or Rioja up to Vasquez if it came into these areas, and you get the midfield switching across. You get the defence coming up as well a little bit, and just trying to restrict the space as much as they possibly can and make it compact and make it hard for Real Madrid to play through. But Real Madrid very quickly push the numbers up in the attacking sense. They'll try and overload those attacking areas of the pitch. They'll do that by pushing Ferland Mendy up to try and provide the width on that left-hand side as Vinicius could come inside, rather, with Mbappe. But the problem is Mbappe and Vinicius, they both occupy the same area of the pitch in that inside left channel, trying to almost look for the ball in behind or look for the ball to feet. And they just kind of get on top of each other. There's no real fluidity. There's no real flexibility. You'll sometimes see Vinicius in the centre position and Mbappe coming out wide left, but it's not rotational in terms of fluid. Like, there's no movements that lead to it. It's almost just they end up in those positions and they just wait for the ball to come to them from deep. So it's still relatively easy for Valencia to handle. It's nothing different than what they would have been doing before. Bellingham as well, typically coming over to the left-hand side. So it's an overload on the left-hand side. But again, very static. That it's kind of easy for Valencia to just maybe block them out and restrict the space they have to work with, especially when in the first half Real Madrid were building up on that right hand side. So it would be with Vasquez could sometimes move up forward. He could stay back as well and make it a 3-2, but he could also move forward either out wide or in the half space, depending on Rodrigo's positioning. If Rodrigo pulled out wide, you'd get Vasquez then attacking the inside channel, but vice versa. If Rodrigo had moved in forward, Vasquez would be maintaining the width. And then as he'd come forward, you get the left back for Valencia pushing in narrow, and you get Rioja dropping in and making it a back five and defending the width of the pitch, tracking the run, and just making sure that Valencia have sufficient enough coverage of the width of the pitch. Almeida would drop into his position so they didn't lose anything in midfield, and it would be a 5-4-1. Again, tough for Real Madrid to break down, very solid, very compact, defensively resilient. And as a result, you'd see Valverde dropping into the sort of right centre-back position as you get Ceballos as the pivot in these areas. And they couldn't really find a way to efficiently play it into this area of the pitch in Mbappe, Bellingham, Vinicius Jr. And they were quite easy, just marked out. They had very little space to work with. Almeida, Berenecchia dropping in, just restricting that space as good as they can. And without having the real technical quality to play through in these areas, Valverde is good, but he's not going to open up a team shape with his passing. And when you look at Valverde's positioning in this game, you can see why Trent Alexander-Arnold is definitely needed for Real Madrid, because he would sit in this position and he would offer that quality. Think of the way Toni Kroos would pull off into left back or in the left back type position and be able to thread the passes through. He'd use his range to knock it long, to knock it short, to play those incisive little balls, tearing open an opponent's shape. You will get that from Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's maybe not as clean yet and well-rounded as Toni Kroos is, but if Ancelotti was to stay, you're dealing with one of the best coaches in the world, and that's a level that he can take his game to with the players he has available as well. When having the runs of Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo ideally could be everything Trent Alexander-Arnold wants, but you can completely see with this framework why Trent Alexander-Arnold could be so essential to Real Madrid. Ceballos, as well as the pivot, just wasn't doing it really, just again lacked a little bit of quality to try and play through. Duro would come back into him and just again offer a lot more midfield solidity and central solidity, preventing him from playing through. And that group on the left just got no time on the ball whatsoever. Sometimes you get Bellingham dropping in really deep alongside Ceballos to get on the ball and try and play forward. But again, the further you get Bellingham away from goal, the worse he is. Just not a player that's going to join in and build up. I still can't believe there are people that want Bellingham in a deeper position for England. I don't get what they see in Bellingham from these deeper areas. He's at his best when he's a goal threat. And if he couldn't play inside to the likes of Mbappe and Vinicius Jr., who didn't really offer a lot of movement in that first half, it has to be said, he could play it around to Ferland Mendy, who, it's fair to say, just isn't a good offensive fullback. He's defensively solid, he's consistent on that front, but on the left-hand side when he's attacking, he looks for the easy option, he plays it safe, he's just not got that killer instinct, that attacking quality in his body. But there were changes for Real Madrid in the second half, and these were it. Now, it was more of a focus on the left-hand side when they were building up. So you get Ceballos dropping into this left-back position, with Tchouameni moving out to the right centre-back position, Valverde as the pivot. And they were favouring the build-up more on this left-hand side. Bellingham as well could then look for the ball in these areas to receive it from deep, take it on the half-turn, and you started seeing a lot more quality with the movement from Kylian Mbappe, especially in these areas, making runs off the back of markers, making the movements into space that occasionally the Valencia centre backs would give. It could be a half inch of space, but as long as there was an opening, he could exploit it and use his timing and his runs to get the ball in these areas. And it was a lot better from him in the second half, much better. Where he didn't get a goal, but I felt like his movement offered a presence that gave an extra added level of dynamism to that left-hand side. Bellingham just quickly getting on the turn, playing through, not labouring on the ball, was excellent. And there is something there with him and Mbappe. It's still not refined, but I just think with his quality in the final third, taking the ball on the half-turn in between defence and midfield to then play those incisive balls forward is excellent. It contributed in Real Madrid coming back into the game and winning it, with Bellingham being the more focused player on the build-up he was. And he wasn't getting a bit ill-disciplined to drop deep and look for the ball in deeper positions. He was waiting. He was finding the space that would open up in between the Valencia midfield. And just to wait for that moment where it could become free and use his body to shield any press onto him and play forward. Also, having Modric come onto the pitch in place for Ceballos, who played as the deeper pivot, and added a bit more quality to the offensive play and used his passing to really try and find angles around the Valencia shape. Again, it's a quality that they don't have, Real Madrid, but the issue is with playing Modric more, you're contributing to the lack of defensive quality you have in the team, with the front four not doing as much as they should be at all. So it's where that balance is, and I don't think having Modric in this team contributes to the balance at all, as much as he has something they seriously lack from an attacking point of view, and his influence, as well as Bellingham's added importance to the team, contributing Real Madrid winning the game. Took his goal really well. It's just with where Real Madrid are at, there's so much sacrifice you need to properly accommodate him, and I don't think Real Madrid just have the setup for it at the minute. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if they do sign Trent Alexander-Arnold in January. I still think he goes in the summer, but I just think when you see there is such a gaping hole for a player of that quality in those deeper areas in this team, I just think if it costs you 30 million, to push you forward to Champions League, to retain La Liga, that for me feels worth it. But Real Madrid make their decisions in the way they do. They're never going to panic. They're never going to feel forced into a situation. They'll do it the way they do it. But commiserations to Valencia. They played well enough to get something from the game, but certain levels of quality you just can't compete with. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Like the video if you liked it. Dislike it if you disliked it. Comment down below and tell me why either way. And subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.